Welcome to the Writer's Almanac. I'm Garrison Keeler. This is a conversation in our series of conversations with poets who have written poems about the pandemic. I am talking to you from my kitchen in New York City, and I am here in our apartment. It's been 8 weeks now that I've been here with my wife and daughter in quarantine. We have not gone out on the street, only out onto a balcony. This is a large moment in our lives, in my life, and I think in the lives of people I know around the country. We have a sense that our culture will not be the same whenever we return to it, if there is such a thing as normal. I have a feeling that I am in no rush to eat in crowded restaurants. Again, I miss baseball, but I'm not sure how much. I have a feeling that I'm not going to be a shopper ever again. I've discovered that I like silence. I've discovered that I am not in favor of democracy in the home. I believe in authoritarian rule, and I think that the woman is the dictator of the home, and we just need to work ourselves around it. It just works much better that way. And I've discovered that for a writer and an introvert, this is an ideal life. I'm going to miss this when it is over. We're going to talk to two poets today. Steve Loomis, who is out in the state of Illinois, just across the river from St. Louis, and Tina Kelley, who is just off to the south of where I am. She's in Essex County, New Jersey, Newark, and so forth. Tina Kelley, who was a reporter for 10 years for the New York Times, and who is the co-author of a book called Almost Home, Helping Kids Move from Homelessness to Hope. She's published 4 books of poems. Actually, the 4th is coming out in October, called Rise Wildly, great title for a book of poetry. Steve Loomis was a 4th grade teacher in Illinois for 30-some years, and now recently retired and become a full-time poet. Tina Kelley, how are you doing in this pandemic?
I can't complain. Doesn't do any good if you do.
You've been very busy, however. You've been busy making face masks and organizing other people to make face masks. Are you finished with all this now? Are you satisfied with it? No?
No, I think we're going to be going on into the fall. We have flannel that's coming in that's donated that we're saving for the cold weather, because I think if our schools open up, all the kids will need masks. And we've gone from serving hospitals and medical facilities to social service agencies, and the need is just keeps coming in. We've delivered our 20,000th this week.
Mm-hmm. Because you wrote for the New York Times, I assume that you know more than I do about most things. What's coming next in the COVID-19 virus? What do you expect? Another wave in the fall?
I'm not really qualified to say, but I suspect that there will be another wave in the fall. I'm optimistic about science getting us out of this at some point, hopefully sooner than later. Mm-hmm. And I have a very strong belief that if everyone wore masks all the time, as they do in countries like Singapore, that our transmission rates would go far, far down. And I wish we had leadership on that.
Have you been quarantining there in Essex County?
We have been pretty much staying at home, except for going out to shop for
Mm-hmm.
groceries.
Mm-hmm. And you have 2 children?
Yes. One is home from college, and one's a sophomore in high school.
Uh-huh. The college student? How does a college student feel about fall term?
She goes to University of Washington in Seattle, and she loves Seattle, and she wants to be back there in August if at all possible. They haven't decided whether they're going to go online with their classes or not. They have since the beginning of March, so it's up in the air.
Mm-hmm. I see. I want to read a poem of yours that I happen to admire, which reads to me like journalism, except maybe for the last line. Let me read it to you. You know it, of course, and let me read it to you and tell me what inspired this poem entitled "I'm Having the Death I'd Always Hoped For," in gratitude for Gus Lindquist, 86, an artist in town. His voice from intensive care sounded chipper, very much his. Hey, I'm pulling the plug today. I inhaled, asked if he wanted a visit. I had to get my son from school first. Gus would try to last that long. At the hospital, I found him comfortable, curious, fascinated, unafraid of earplug silence, darkness, focused on creativity, diversity, love. He wanted the young doctor's company, told her after a few calls and emails on his to-do list to please stop dialysis. It would take a day. He wouldn't suffer. I stayed an hour, kissed Gus goodbye. The cheek was cold. Walking down the hall, I didn't crumble. Off to my son's soccer game, somehow. By next morning, his heart slowed to done. I couldn't say rest in peace. In an ancient ritual, he knew one shines light on the other's head, heart, and hands. Rest in light. How did you know Gus Lindquist?
I wish he could have heard you read that. That was beautifully read. I knew him when I was working on a blog for the New York Times, a local news blog for Maplewood, where I live, and South Orange and Milburn. And he wrote a column called The Old Man about growing older.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a very generous, artistic character. And we stayed in touch after the blog ended. And it's basically a true story. I was just taking dictation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a lovely poem. It's a lovely, lovely poem.
Thank you.
Steve Loomis, how are you doing in this pandemic?
Alternating like a metronome between being very well adjusted to it and kind of frustrated.
What's your frustration?
That as a person 72 years old, that I may not get to go back to the restaurants, even when they do open up, and activities for older people may be limited.
What are you hoping to find in a crowded restaurant, Steve, if I may ask?
Just camaraderie, life, action. It's uplifting to be around people. I don't like to be alone all that much.
Have you ever heard of Zoom, Steve?
We just used Zoom the other day. We had a college pep band got back together, the alumni band, and I sent my part in, and they included it, and I got to see that. So I've used it just the one time.
Zoom is going to replace the crowded restaurants, Steve.
I think so.
You can eat your own food and save a good deal of money, and you spend 40 minutes and then you're done, and you're home already, and
Yeah.
you can drink as many glasses of wine as you like, and you don't need to worry about the drive home. Is this not true, Tina? Zoom is going to replace uh, social life as we used to know it.
I see some upsides. I like being able to skip around in church services from one church to another, and I like being able to knit while I'm at church. And I like seeing friends who I wouldn't see usually on Zoom. We're having our college reunion this weekend on Zoom, and I don't think that's going to come close to the real thing, but it's
Mm.
better than not having anything.
Yeah, yeah. But Zoom is a way of concentrating our conversation, and it's a way of getting it out what we have to say right away. I really have become fond of Zoom. I don't do it all the time, but telephone conversations and Zoom, I don't know. I think they're going to be more important in the future. I don't see us returning to what we used to think of as normal life. And I say that sitting here on 90th Street in Manhattan. People come to Manhattan for excitement. I think life after this is going to be different. Can you accept that, Steve?
Yes, I think there'll be a lot of people that want to move out of the big cities and move into smaller homes and isolated places because they can keep electronically in touch and they won't be at risk.
Mhm. So you taught fourth grade, Steve Loomis. I admire you for that. I just admire you with my whole heart. I wouldn't have lasted 2 years teaching fourth grade. I wouldn't know how to deal with kids that age. How did you ever stand up and do this for a career?
Well, fourth graders are delightful. If you had to pick out an age, I certainly think I would pick out the 9-year-olds because, the kids in the middle grades and the junior high grades are becoming boy girl conscious and they get a little harder to handle. And fourth grade's just great. I still think even if I did go in as a substitute teacher, it would be good to go to fourth graders.
Fourth graders are delightful. Did I hear you say that? Really?
Well, it's been a while since I was actually in the classroom, and they may have changed a good deal,
Are you
but
having memory problems, Steve Limich? Or
not really.
uh,
But because I have a grandson who's a fourth grader, so I'm still in touch, and you know, they just have a spirit. They're happy kids usually.
mhm. Okay. So you're not planning to go back to it. You're launched in a career as a poet, and
I had an opportunity. A parochial school contacted me after I retired to take, I think it was fourth grade, but I went ahead and went. My wife was the head of a museum, and I went into the research department at the museum for 5 years, and that's what I did instead of teaching.
Tina, speaking of young people, I wonder if I could ask you about this book you co-authored with a fascinating title, Almost Home, Helping Kids Move from Homelessness to Hope.
I wrote
What's it
that
about?
with, oh, sorry, go ahead.
What's it about?
It's about 6 young people who are helped by Covenant House International, which is the largest shelter system for kids in the whole hemisphere, actually, serving kids basically ages 17 to 21. And I wrote it with the president of the organization, Kevin Ryan, and we followed the stories of several young people as they had gone through getting kicked out of their houses for being gay, getting trafficked by pimps, getting aging out of foster care. There were a number of different issues that each one faced, and some were happy endings, some were not, and it showed the kind of work that the agency does and the kind of issues that young people face.
And you're writing about this in a new book, as I understand, about lifting students out of poverty. Is it about the same program?
No, this one, the one that I'm doing a book proposal on now is about a 6-year high school model that gives kids they don't have to test into this program. They could be just regular old average performing or below average performing eighth graders. And the school that I'm writing about is a model with a high school, a public high school, a community college, and a corporate partner. So the kids who get into the program get a free associate's degree as well as a high school diploma. It's a 6-year program, and they're working with the folks in the industry who will be teaching them or mentoring them and helping them with the skills that they would need to get in an entry-level job in the science and technology fields. So it's in 220 schools right now. It covers, I think, a quarter of the entire high school population of Dallas, and it gets kids who follow through on it immediately out of poverty and into the middle class in a career that has a lot of growth potential.
So is writing the book making you hopeful?
Yes, that's why I was drawn to the topic, because I wasn't very hopeful about just the state of affairs even before the pandemic. This makes me very hopeful because it's pretty easy to adopt. It doesn't cost the school districts much of anything, and it lifts kids out of, it gives kids brighter futures.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because we are heading into an economic trough.
Yep.
And we have no idea how long this will be.
Mm-mm.
Is this not true, Steve?
Oh, I think so. The farmers around here are having a difficult time, and of course, all the community in general. So this will be long lasting, I'm afraid, although I do think we'll bounce back.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any estimate of when that might happen? Steve Loomis, fourth grade teacher.
Get a vaccine that works, you'll see things start to return.
You are more hopeful than many people I know who are medical people, but good for you. I'm glad. I want to read this poem that you wrote called "Visitors," if I may. Steve Loomis, "Visitors." The eagle was minutes from touching down on the surface of the moon. Millennia of gazing wistfully at that silver orb were about to be over. An American spacecraft was actually landing there. I was sprawled on a stiff, scratchy old couch in the sunlit living room of my grandparents' house on Locust Street. Seconds ticked away as breathless millions around the globe were riveted to their flickering black and white TVs. My grandparents, however, were out in the kitchen. It wasn't that they didn't know what was going on. They were blithely chatting away about nothing with another couple who had come visiting. Mom and Pop had been born when Grover Cleveland was in his second administration. Cars had yet to replace horses on the dirt roads of the nation. But now, to excuse yourself or invite your company to witness a man landing on the surface of the moon? Nope, not interested. I glanced back at the screen. Gray dust was rising as Armstrong and Aldrin became the most famous persons who ever lived. The eagle had reached the surface. I was filled with awe and wonder. My grandparents continued to discuss fishing gear and cooking recipes. I'm taking this as a true poem, Steve Loomis.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way it happened. I can still feel that scratchy couch right now.
Mm-hmm. I sat and watched John Glenn make his flight around the Earth. and with my grandmother, who was born in 1880, and she was quite interested. She was quite sure that people would reach the moon eventually. She wouldn't live to see it, but she knew it was going to happen, and she was all in favor of it. We come from two different lines of people.
I can't explain why they didn't come out there. I remember looking in there a couple of times and thinking, surely they'll walk in here or show some degree of interest, but it was a lively conversation. They were out there laughing, and I just looked at the screen. It was, here's history and there's like chit chat, and they don't come in. I don't know. I still don't get it.
Well, now they gave you something to write a poem about, and
Yeah.
and you took advantage of it. I want to get around to the pandemic here, this historic moment. Here we are sitting making chit chat during a profound historic moment. Nobody really knows what is coming next. And when was the last time this was true in our country, Tina Kelley, that the future was such a complete blank? I can't think of a time.
I felt it in 2001, especially with the anthrax coming so soon after 9/11. I was on maternity leave from the Times that month, actually during 9/11 itself, and when the anthrax attacks happened. And I remember carrying my daughter around in a baby carrier and thinking, like, are you going to make it to age 7? Are you going to make it to the age of the other kids I would see walking down the street? Because everything seemed so dangerous. And, the city bounced back, and not never to be exactly the same, but I think human beings are really stupid, and I think they're also really tough and resilient at the same time.
Mm. But after 9/11, Tina, people did not sequester themselves in their homes.
No.
People, New Yorkers, I remember, went out to restaurants to show as an act of defiance,
Mhm.
even as there was dust in the air and scraps of paper floating around. New Yorkers went out on the streets. They stood around their buildings and they sang patriotic songs and they held candles. I mean, it was a profound time, but it was a very different time from this. I think we just absolutely have no idea what 2021 will be like, and of course, a good deal depends on this election. I don't think we need to get into politics, but we can see that this upcoming election is really a watershed, don't you think, Steve?
Yeah, I was thinking what Tina said about the anthrax, and I was traumatized at the daughter in it. Uh, I think the fear then was even stronger than it is for me right now, personally.
Mm-hmm. We had just a little microphone glitch as you were talking there, Steve. Are you on mic? Are you?
I'm still here. Yes.
Yes, you are. I see that you're there. I just want to make sure that we don't miss what you have to say.
I have a little screen notification set up, unstable. My tech guy's coming in here to check on it. Well, you have to have your son run the computer,
Yes, of course. So your tech guy is checking right now?
Yeah, I think he's got it dialed in again.
Okay. All right. Very good. Tina, I wonder if you would read your pandemic poem for us.
Gladly. Hold on, let me find it. It's called National Observance Day. The smell of freshly cut grass is a plant distress call. A man looks so vulnerable late at night, glasses just removed, so spent. The sign in the band room read, "If I can recognize what you're playing, you're not practicing right." Damn. Grind the impossible measure over and over. Rehearse, until a groove forms. This is true of every last skill, including wiving, especially parenting, plus sourdough. Trudging through the top floor of this night, a woman notices she's never been this old before, she'll never be this young again. There are species dying out before zoologists identify them. I wonder which sick neighbors next month's blooms will go to. Was there ever a hurricane that never hit land, just grew wilder and faster and spun out between Iceland and Greenland? In the end, eons pass so quickly that if one fast forwards the sound, one hears a rhythm section full of full filing cabinets from all across town falling into basements because roofs leaked and houses slowly fell apart.
I was never in high school band, so I don't know what that sign means. If I can recognize what you're playing, you're not practicing right.
I saw that in a trip back to my high school. There was a reunion of our high school in honor of our band professor, and I was in the band room, and it was a new sign. I wasn't familiar with it, but it implies that you have to just do the really hard parts over and over and over, and that's the way to make it sound good. And that is similar to parenting and being a spouse and being a good sourdough bread maker.
Grind the impossible measure, in other words, over and over. Rehearse until a groove forms. This is true of every last skill, including wiving, especially parenting, plus sourdough. You agree with that, Steve? Grind the impossible measure over and over?
I've been there. I'm surrounded right here by music stands and instruments and so forth. And we, in our community band, would have 11 numbers every Tuesday night. And there would be certain ones you'd have to focus on. But sometimes it boiled down to one or two measures that you just have to play it over and over. And if you can't get it perfect, you'll have to modify it a little bit. But yeah, it's that way.
What instrument do you play, Steve?
Primarily, I play euphonium. It's like a 3/4 scale tuba.
Uh-huh. I can't even imagine what that's like to make those low notes. How does it feel?
Your lips buzz, and it takes a good deal of air support, but they'll come out.
Uh-huh. Okay. So when will you get to do this again?
According to what I'm hearing, it's going to have to be basically almost as all clear as it can possibly get, because there was a choir of people singing in the Pacific Northwest, I think. Mm-hmm. They went ahead and had practice, and 80% of them caught COVID-19. So, the air transfer from instruments in a bandstand setting where you're not 6 feet apart would be something to concern yourself with. But I'm hopeful we'll get back to it, because basically that's what I do.
Nobody wants to stand close to the euphonium, however, because they can see the spit falling onto the floor.
Oh, yeah.
And they know that some of that spit is being exhaled at under great pressure out into the air.
I think if they did a scientific send up on that where they could actually see all of it coming out like smoke, it would be horrifying. But to now, it's horrifying. In the past, no one cared.
Well, some of us did not sit in the front row when we went to hear a band play.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's where you catch the piccolos. That's another issue entirely.
Yes. People who sang on the radio, sang into a microphone, and they sang in very gentle, light voices. but in opera, they're exhaling out almost up to the balcony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's in my poem, as a matter of fact.
Yes. Would you read your pandemic poem, Steve Loomis?
Life in the ultra slow lane. Life in the ultra slow lane presents a variety of intriguing options. Grow a full beard, shave your skull, wear the same clothes 9 days in a row. By this time, you're beginning to look like an inmate in a French overseas penal colony. You perceive your house to be Devil's Island with better food. You develop an intense yearning to mow your yard. 47 degrees and raining, fine. Hockey's no longer on TV. You're seized by shirt-rippling palpitations and a strange trickling sweat. You dial in a 3-hour Metropolitan Opera production and you marvel at the incomparable Christine Gerke as she blowtorches her way through the most difficult arias with enough air support to be heard in Boston, and you consider sending fan mail. You opt to take a risky trip to mail a letter, but the 7-block journey through empty streets seems like a vacation in Rio. You hunker in your car outside Walmart to get 40% of what you ordered, roughly an hour late. You kill time writing the alphabet over and over on a tiny yellow Post-it note. Your cursive has the precision design of a Fabergé egg. And then you receive a precious shipment of 2 bottles of paint, a bag of generic taco chips, and half a dozen apples grown last year in South America. You scuttle back to your house, and the garage door slams behind you. The living room decor dissolves in a blur, and you could swear you're in an all-concrete basement with a rusted-out washing machine for a companion. But wait, that's your wife, glowering at you and muttering something about cleaning the shower stall. Thinking creatively, you decide to sit cross-legged on the rug, gazing out the window for 45 minutes before the mailman pulls up. 2 bills, a circular, coupons from Sonic, and a fold-out color photo of a politician the size of a circus poster. It occurs to you, you don't know what day it is. But pondering the question, you narrow it down to somewhere between Monday and Thursday. And the third nap of the day becomes a legitimate option. You notice a bird on a branch just outside the window. He's been getting pelted by rain and shivering in the snow for 4 months while you've been toasty inside. But now he gets his revenge. He flies away.
That sounds like it, all right. So, but you do know the day of the week, right?
Yeah, I believe Wednesday.
Huh? You're close. You're extremely close.
Thursday.
So, Tina, what's your ambition at this point as a writer? You have a book of poems coming out in the fall.
Yes, I do. I'm hoping that people will read it. Usually, I would be working to schedule live poetry readings in the city or in Essex County, and our local bookstore is closed for visits or readings. And I don't know quite who to approach about others. I'm just waiting and seeing.
Yeah. What's the title of the book that's coming out?
It's called Rise Wildly, and it's coming out from Cat and Carey Press.
Yes. How long did you think about that title, Rise Wildly?
Not very long. It's a line from a poem about trains that can fly. I read a headline that said trains running after storms from the New York Times, and I took it literally, and I thought, wow, what would it be like if the trains were chasing the storms? And I kind of just ran with it. Mm-hmm. And it's a very joyful poem, and the collection has a lot of joy in it as well as a lot of other emotions. Mm-hmm. It just seemed like a good title.
It's a memorable title, and that's what a title is supposed to be, right?
Yes.
Rise wildly, rise wildly. Steve Loomis, are you rising wildly or thinking about it?
Well, I've got outside to exercise every day but 10 this year, so that's rising and getting out the door.
Let me take you back to fourth grade, Steve. I just admire you more than I can ever possibly say for teaching fourth grade. Even though you say fourth graders are delightful, I don't believe you for 1 minute. What was your strategy? What are your rules for maintaining authority? I mean, don't you need to do that teaching fourth grade?
Yeah, I had pretty much the standard thing, no talking, no walking around the room. This was way before the era where everybody's mixing and doing creative things. I mean, this is old school. This is the old birch rod teacher,
Uh-huh.
I wasn't mean to people. We had a lot of fun. But by and large, you do have to ride herd on kids, regardless of what grade they're in. And we kept order.
So you would not be comfortable in a fourth grade classroom today, I take it?
I think I could adapt for a short time, but I don't think long term because of the technology demands, as you can see. I mean, I'm not that savvy, and modern teachers are younger people with more energy and a lot more expertise.
I did not want my children to be taught creativity, Steve. I want them to pursue creativity if they wish as an act of rebellion against me and without any encouragement on my part or the school's part. I'm opposed to creativity as an encouraged activity.
Come to think of it, I agree.
Unemployment among poets is extremely high, and so I want my children aimed toward a calling, a career. Poetry is best pursued by older people like you and me.
You have to have experience. If you've seen life a lot, you know what to write about.
Exactly. What did we know when we were 20 years old? I wanted desperately to be a poet, and I wrote desperate poems. And there isn't a single poem that I wrote when I was a serious poet that I would ever want either of you to hear right now.
There's a song called The Summer of '69, and in the summer of '69, I was playing rock and roll and bass guitar. But I wouldn't trade places with that young man for anything now. I'd rather be where I am.
Good. So, Tina, onward we go.
Yep. I'm sort of comforted by the fact that 3 months ago we didn't know anything at all about COVID or how to manage it. And 3 months from now, when my daughter wants to get on a plane to go back to college, we can learn a whole lot in 3 months' time. And hopefully by then, when I have to risk the idea of putting her in an airplane, we'll know how to do it better than we do now.
Steve says that fourth grade has changed completely. How about teenagers? Have they changed from 10 years ago?
I don't know. I think there's a lot of them are spending a lot of time on screens, and I think that's going to change their brains, and it makes me miss them when they're on their screens. But I think the screens are saving them during this. Like, my kids can have their social life without endangering themselves because they are doing Zoom meetings with their roommates and with their friends in high school, and it'll help them get through without being isolated.
Do teenagers read their mother's poetry if their mother happens to be a poet?
If the poems are about them, yes.
I would feel uneasy if my mother were a poet. I would feel watched.
I'm pretty gentle with them, and they're very inspiring.
Good. So, any closing thoughts? Are we hopeful? We sound hopeful.
I'm very hopeful, and I just have to say, to be in the company of two major leaguers, Hall of Famers like you guys, for a guy that drives a 17-year-old pickup truck, I'm just over the moon.
17-year-old pickup truck. So you are into auto maintenance as well.
No, but my mechanic is.
Oh, he is. Good. We hope so. We hope so.
Well, I think you're in a very noble profession, and I share Mr. Keeler's opinion about teachers.
Well,
So
thank you. My son is a 4th generation teacher himself.
I always say thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.
Who is he teaching?
He has junior high kids over in one of the St. Louis schools, and he's a soccer coach and very successful, and well respected, and I'm tremendously proud of him. And also his wife is an English teacher in a high school in St. Louis.
Well, bless them both.
Yeah.
I am just an old writer sitting alone in a kitchen on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and that's what I'm going to stay.
Garrison, I just wanted to say one more thing, and that is you're kind of our hero, and my son and daughter-in-law named one of their children Garrison after you.
Oh, I will remember that child in my prayers fervently. All right. Thank you both. Thank you, Tina Kelley. Thank you, Steve Loomis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Best to both of you.